Now in this lesson we're going to look at the same thing that we did last time, which was pedaling the three-note pattern. But this time I'm going to introduce a two-note pattern and a four-note pattern as well, and getting around some of the problems that present themselves when you end on a bend. Now, when we did the three-note pattern, other than the one that ended on the bend, for example this one here, I should point out that you can pedal at the end of the phrase, not just at the beginning. You can pedal at the beginning to get the sense of timing, but it's also very effective for continuity to pedal at the end of the phrase. Apart from anything else, it gives you a certain amount of time to decide what on earth you're going to do next. So anyway, let's look at the bend, because the problem with this note is to pedal on that note is quite difficult because you're propping the string up in pitch. If you pedal with vibrato, it actually sounds really good, but again, it's slightly difficult to do that, especially if you haven't quite mastered the art of bend vibrato yet. What I suggest you do, though, is take a look at another simple pattern. This is just a two-note pattern that we'll create a phrase out of. We'll be on the third string, 5th fret, going to the third string, 7th fret. Now, here are my two-note pattern. I could play those two notes over and over again, cycle them round or loop them. But as a solo device, that might sound somewhat boring and dull. I could also create a two-note pattern out of the same two notes, but going from the 7th fret to the 5th fret. What I recommend you do, of course, is to take the time, look at that two-note pattern, practice it, and round it off to each of the three chord notes. Here we go, starting with this two-note pattern. There's my rounding off. Notice I play the same note twice before I bend. Again. And then there's another one. And then there's another one. Now let's just back up a little bit to this one. For effect, you may want to consider adding a hammer-on and then pick the last note. That's often very effective. Once again, as opposed to playing each note. And let's look at the other two-note pattern from here to here with the rounding off to each of the chord notes. I simply double up that note because it is a chord note at the end of the two-note pattern again. And then finally, here notice I'm using my third finger as opposed to that one because it doesn't really matter. I'm not getting any staccato or chopped off notes. Now let's look at that early three-note pattern again that wound up on a bend and see how we can get out of that bend situation by going to a two-note pattern and creating two rather lovely phrases there. Again. Or we could go. Or we could go to that bend and go to the other two-note pattern. Or we're going to learn a four-note pattern. This is a little longer than the others, but it's very effective. We start with the first finger on the third string, 5th fret. We go from there to the 4th string. So there's note 1, there's note 2. Note 3, we use our third finger, 3rd string, 7th fret. There. And then back to the 4th string. That concludes 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, it's important to know that when playing this, again, everything I'm doing is with a clean sounding guitar. But if I had a lot of processing, that is an effects unit or an overdrive or a distortion or just a loud amplifier, each of these notes, if I hold them down going to the next, will create rather an ugly blurring together of two notes. So what I would like you to do is to lift off each fingertip and articulate each note with precise lifting of the fingertips. We'll try that again. Now, once again, a melodic phrase is usually short, so this is getting sort of to the long end of a phrase, but if you listen to me play the four notes, you can hear some nice melodies coming out of this four-note pattern. I'll go to the bend first. Technically that's hard to do because I end up with my middle finger, hardly a good position to begin a bend from, so I have to let go of that note, form the proper bend formation of my three fingers, and then execute the bend. You can try that. That's the hardest chord note to end on. Then we'll try this one. It's fairly easy. So there was our four-note pattern resolving to a chord note there. We have the final one there where we just double up that last note. 1, 2, 3, 4, double the note up. And once again, if you were applying that rhythmically playing and you weren't sure how to play, you could pedal a bit on the first note. And this particular pattern, if you listen to it with a backing tape to jam to, or a backing soundtrack, you will hear if I play this continuously, it creates quite an interesting tug against the background rhythm. We're going to take a quick close look at the right hand involved in picking that four-note pattern. Here's the placement of my pick. Now ideally, if you can, with a pattern like this, it's nice to pick in between the strings. Of course, if you're alternating your picking when you're soloing, there's no guarantee that on that first note you'll be conveniently on a downstroke going to an upstroke on the fourth string. But if you watch my picking this way, my fingers, or at least my pick rather, has to travel a greater distance than if it was in between or inside the strings. So if you can, if you're just going for a four-note pattern like that, you actually may want to work within the strings itself. Now just to wind up this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate using the four-note, the three-note, the two-note pattern, doing mostly melodic phrases. The dynamic phrases we'll leave for a future lesson.